What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing staring entities in the wilderness. And I know that sounds a little odd, but just hear me out because I think most of you guys will know what I'm talking about by the end of this video. As most of us already know here, the forests and wilderness areas of this world are veritable breeding grounds for strange and supernatural happenings, as well as strange and oftentimes supernatural beings. Bizarre tales that can't be explained always seem to come from these sorts of places, and it seems like every time, at least to me, that what's happening to the people coming forward while in those woods, the encounters that they're having, are taking place in some sort of alternate reality or realm that they have no clue where it is or how they ended up there. It isn't always the case that there's some sort of sparkly or misty bubble that one knowingly walks through, and more often than not, in most cases, the person is seemingly in a regular, albeit oftentimes creepy forest, doing whatever it is that they normally do, and then the very next second, they're in this sort of alternate dimension or realm. Here are some encounters I've come across of people who had experiences that I haven't come across before, in that they seem like they came up against some spectral or ghostly forces that most of the population, including in this community as well, aren't or may not even be that aware of yet. Specifically, the one thing all these encounters have in common is an entity that seems to do nothing more than stare at them and terrify them. It sounds creepy, and I'm sure it is, but I also feel like there's much more here than what meets the eye. And I will definitely let you guys know my thoughts along the way. But for now, let's jump right in. So this first encounter is one you all may be familiar with already if you know anything about the missing 411 phenomenon popularized by David Paulides. It happened on September 22nd, 2012, when 52-year-old Linda Arteaga and her brother, 56-year-old Eddie Huff, went hiking together in the forests of the Arkansas Ozarks near the town of St. Joe. And the whole thing started when Eddie came out of the forest by himself and returned home, telling everyone that he had dropped Linda off at a relative's house, and don't worry, she's doing okay. In reality, though, Linda didn't leave the forest with her brother, and the two had somehow become separated. Linda was nowhere to be found, and it didn't take long for other family members and friends to realize that she wasn't at the relative's house where Eddie had said he had brought her, and that she had never been there after they left that hiking trip. A large-scale search was launched for her, and she was found that same day, luckily, but she had a rather bizarre and very terrifying story to tell as to where she had been and what she had experienced out there when she was alone. When Linda was found, she was overwhelmingly distressed and still in the woods. When she was questioned about what happened to her, Linda couldn't remember how she and her brother had become separated in the first place, which was the first detail that struck everyone as very odd, because apparently her brother hadn't even known that they had been separated in the first place either, and was adamant that he remembered leaving the woods with her, driving all the way to this relative or friend's house and dropping her off there. So that is extremely bizarre that he has this whole memory and she doesn't remember what happened for the most part either. So Linda mentioned that she thought Eddie had gotten hurt somehow and that she had left him to go and try to find some help for him. She walked quickly along the trails, hoping to see other hikers that she could explain the situation to and whom she was hoping would be able to help them, but that is not what happened. While she came across other hikers, or at least other people, out there in the woods, her attempts at communicating with them had been futile. She said no matter what she said or did, the other people didn't seem to be able to see her, hear her, and they weren't even aware, seemingly, of her presence. She also said that she saw other shadowy figures who seemed like they were trying to hide behind trees and otherwise in the woods, seemingly hoping that she wouldn't see or notice them. Linda said, quote, "These people were hiding in the bushes. They were weird people. Very weird people," end quote. At some point, she saw those same figures staring at her, and that they always managed to be standing behind some tree or with some other obstacle in front of them. Somehow, it was like she could never really see their faces. One of the searchers who found Linda was a deputy named Dwayne Pierce, and he said that when they found her, quote, "She wasn't quite right in her head," end quote. Some people believe that she might have accidentally ingested some hallucinogenic berries, but honestly, there's no more information about this case, and therefore I have no idea, and it's hard to know. I wonder if this case would have been one that I completely overlooked had it not been for the fact I've recently been coming across very similar encounters from people all over the place who claim they also ran into or came across those same weird people staring from behind the trees and other objects and things in the woods, but not responding to them at all when they tried to communicate. I wonder if that's what those entities, whatever they were hoping for. There's a few things here I want to talk about, so let's quickly unpack this. First and foremost, why hasn't there been any more information at all about the blatant and blaringly obvious lie Eddie told about leaving the woods with his sister and dropping her off at someone's house? Did he just happen to supposedly eat hallucinogenic berries and then have a hallucination that he did those things? Wasn't at least Linda brought to the hospital, and wouldn't they have found out if there was something like that in her system? If there weren't hallucinogenics involved, and I really don't think there were based on what I just told you about so many other similar cases popping up all over the place, then why did he lie like that? And why wasn't he frantic about her being missing? Why did he leave her in the woods and then not get help, instead choosing to lie and make everyone think she was okay in the first place if he wasn't trying to hide or cover something up? Which it actually doesn't seem like he was, though. It makes me think that whatever those entities were, they planted the whole story in his head, and not only that, they gave him that experience, making him believe wholeheartedly that the story he told their friends and other family members was 100% true. And I've seen this before with the Fae. Now, I'm not saying these entities are the Fae or that they aren't the Fae, but I've seen this before where, for example, an old man was missing in the wilderness for days, possibly even weeks, and the whole time he thought he was at home. He was sitting down on rocks thinking he was eating at a fancy restaurant with his wife. He was having conversations with her and frolicking in the woods, and meanwhile she was out with a search party searching for him. But it was all very, very real to him. Honestly, too, that's what scares me more than anything else, because think of how powerful they would have had to have been in order to keep a glimmer of someone's mind going for that length of distance outside of the woods and for that long. There was never any information about why he had lied or where he had gotten the idea from, and that's incredibly frustrating, infuriatingly so. What did they want Linda for, and how long do they expect this ruse to continue and hold up? What were they planning? Because it seems like they were planning on her not being there when searchers showed up for her, and I wonder if she would have made it through the night had her family not acted so quickly. Then again, why did her family act so fast unless they immediately called the relative and asked to speak to her or if they'd seen her? And if so, why didn't they trust what Eddie had said? So another thing I wondered about is why didn't any of the hikers she ran into acknowledge her presence, and why had no one ever come forward to say that they had seen her out in those woods that day looking for help? Why hadn't any of those many hikers, allegedly, that she ran into ever come forward and say, oh, yep, that was me. I was so distracted. I, for whatever reason, ignored this poor woman who was screaming and begging for help in my face. I mean, nobody ever came forward and did that, right? Also, she said that the people looked and were very strange, but there's no elaboration on that, so we don't know how. I wonder if she inadvertently walked into another dimension and was clocked by those behind the tree people, and the other hikers were humans from that place and that time, where and whenever it was, and therefore weren't able to see her because of that reason. The things behind the tree didn't seem noticeable to any of the other hikers there who were seemingly human at least, and that leads me to believe that they either could become visible to who they wanted to and when, or that the humans from the alternate realm were so used to them that they didn't even really notice or acknowledge them anymore. It's very confusing, it's incredibly frustrating, and downright scary, but I feel like this case would have very quickly faded into the background had it not been for others coming forward saying they experienced something similar. I hope y'all are following me here because my thoughts move fairly quickly when I'm excited and exasperated. Try to keep up as we move along to our next case. A witness who calls himself John R. posted his encounter on the site Backpackverse. He's from the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and he often took hikes in the wilderness areas around his home. On the day in question, he was out for a hike, as usual, at around 5 p.m., and at that time of night, there weren't too many other hikers out there on those trails. As it got darker, the number of hikers got smaller until it was only John who was left out there in the wilderness, seemingly all by himself. And it's only when he was finally all alone that things would take a bizarre turn for the highly strange. He began to feel like he was not only being watched but followed as well, and he couldn't see anyone anywhere near around him. At first, he said it was just a bit of a creepy feeling, but it quickly became more ominous when a strange fog appeared and rolled throughout the woods out of nowhere and covered the trail he was hiking in a thick blanket of it. It looked almost like a whiteout condition one would see when it snows very hard and very fast all at once. Everything along the trail was covered in a very thick cloud of white, and while this would be enough to freak most people out, John was about to be confronted with something strange out there that defied conventional explanation. He said, quote, "At first the fog was just a thin layer, but as my hike continued, it started to get so bad that I couldn't see 6 feet in front of me. My heart rate started jacking up with the feeling of something still following me through the fog. I wanted to turn around to convince myself I was imagining things, but I was too afraid to stop. Sick of feeling paranoid, I came to a sudden stop. I turned around, and there through the haze was a woman standing a few yards away from me. I knew there was no one else on the trail as I didn't pass anybody after the halfway point. Panicking, I started running as fast as I could back to my car. I looked back again, and the woman was still the same distance away. She just stood there, looking right through me. I just kept running, hoping to get away from the mysterious figure. My heart was pounding, sweat was dripping from my forehead as I breathed heavily. I was about to have a panic attack until I noticed the fog was suddenly disappearing around me. I looked back, and the mysterious woman had vanished. I kept running quickly to the end of the trail, finally reaching my car. Ever since that day, I've been too afraid to take hikes alone. I've replayed the events in my head, trying to convince myself I'm not crazy. I don't know what the mysterious figure in the fog wanted, but I feel in my bones that I barely escaped with my life that day." End quote. Could this have been a lone ghost looking for someone to connect with, as some people have suggested? I don't think so, because if that was the case, then she would have at least said something or even appeared at the other end of the trail to cut him off. It's like he walked into another realm for a few minutes, but because he immediately thought to get the hell out of there, he ended up being okay. How many people have experiences like these who don't make it out to tell the tale and end up mysteriously missing and never found or found deceased? That's the question that keeps replaying in my head as I go through these encounters and as I research them. I also definitely think that whatever that woman was, she wasn't anything good and was merely disguised as human. Maybe that's why there needed to be fog, so that there was only the silhouette to go by and so that he didn't see what she actually really was. I also say that because of the intense dread and fear that seemed to creep up on him before the fog even rolled in. He took walks through those same woods and along those same trails at the same time every single night. So what made that night so different, I wonder? I probably won't even have an answer to those questions, but they are worth asking anyway, in my opinion. And please let me know what you all think in the comments below, please. It reminded me of the Black-Eyed Kids in that something primal and deep down inside of John seemed to sense the female before she or the fog were anywhere in sight. I think she was following him for a long time, and I think that he knew it, but he just couldn't spot her because she made it so he wasn't able to until she had the cover of the fog around her. Covering what? I definitely don't know, and I'm not even sure that I would like to imagine what it could have been. From the site Occult Museum came a witness named Michael Licini, who at the time was hiking with some friends up a hillside that was thick and dense with trees. It was during a long weekend, and for whatever reason, it was the middle of the night. Although it was around midnight, the light of the full moon made it so that the friends were able to see fairly well, and they were all having a good time until they weren't. They were all chatting and laughing, and at some point in the hike, Michael noticed something that caught his attention that distracted him. Michael said, quote, "On my right, I saw a tall, shadowy figure standing perfectly upright on the top of a small grassy hill. It was standing there right next to a large dead tree, staring right in my direction. I couldn't make out any details. Both the tree and the tall figure were silhouetted under the moonlight. The strange part was seeing this figure didn't scare me. I didn't immediately sense any threat. I almost assumed it might have been just another hiker or somebody having a smoke. I passively turned my flashlight on it, and that's when it happened. In an instant, as my light hit that spot where this figure was standing, it instantly moved just outside of the range of my flashlight, like it teleported or something. But just as vividly as I saw it standing in its initial spot, as my light hit that spot and the figure moved, I could see it standing just outside the range of my light. My breath paused as a wave of dread washed over me. Something felt 100% unnatural about what had just happened. As a reflex, I moved my light to the new spot where the figure was, and as my light passed it, it just disappeared. I've never passed out in my entire life, not from heat, not from getting knocked out, never. But in that moment, I felt my knees give away from under me, and I just fell to the ground. My friends turned and looked at me, trying to pick myself up, and my knees were too wobbly to stand. They helped me, and I tried explaining to them what I had just experienced. I'm willing to bet it was all just a light/shadows playing games with my eyes, but I'll never be able to explain that sensation I felt of feeling like I had just seen something I shouldn't have seen, something so unnatural that my body's instinctual reaction to it was to go limp, end quote. No, Michael, no. It wasn't the light and shadows playing games with your mind and your eyes, and I would be willing to bet on that fact. His friends didn't see anything, and I would be willing to bet that this is just another scenario where someone would normally be alone, pass out, and then end up permanently missing with no explanation as to where they went, ever. He's just lucky his friends were there. I put so much stock in instinct and intuition, and I know that if something feels wrong, it is. And if something seems evil, it is too. Not enough people rely on intuitive hits, and that's how so many people get themselves into trouble and to dangerous situations. I wonder, though, what it wants. If it was advanced enough to be able to just vanish and to otherwise move in a matter of an instant to teleport from one spot to another, then surely it could have done worse to the group and to Michael himself than just standing there watching them. I just don't know, guys. But I will say, it really does explain all of the people who constantly feel like they're being watched by unseen eyes and followed through the woods by unseen beings. It comes up all the time of encounters I receive, encounters all over the internet, in books, of people saying, it was a beautiful day outside, but I felt like I was being watched, or I felt like I was being followed, or my personal favorite, I felt like I was suddenly prey. Never turn your back on your gut instinct, and normally your initial one is right. Maybe the almost passing out was the result of being fed off of by whatever it was, and I'm also willing to bet that there was more than one of whatever that thing was too. It's smart enough to not allow itself to be really completely seen, and that's another terrifying aspect to all of this. In every single case, it knows not to allow itself to be seen any more than to instill fear in the person viewing it. The strong reactions of fear, danger, and of the person feeling like they aren't supposed to be there or to be seeing what they are is extremely common and is part of almost every single case I've come across so far. And the next one is no different. It comes from the site Hiking Soul, and it's a very bizarre report from a user called Lavrenti. Lavrenti was on a hike in the wilderness, but was somewhat off a beaten path as he traversed a trail that had been made by deer in the area and not one that was man-made. He said he was, quote, out in the middle of nowhere, end quote, and that as he walked, he suddenly heard an inexplicable sound from somewhere nearby in the surrounding trees that sounded very much like a sheep bleating. It was a little odd, and it was also getting dark out there, which made him start to feel even more uneasy, but things were about to get incredibly scary. And I said bleeding, not bleeding like blood, bleating like baying. But like I said, things were about to get incredibly scary, as he recounts for us by saying, quote, at first it didn't strike me as unusual because on the surface, hearing a sheep in the country doesn't seem out of place. Then I heard it again, directly from the shadows to my left, and two things hit me at once. One, this is deep wilderness and there is no farmland around me. Two, the baaing sounds too perfect. It sounds like somebody doing a really good impression of a sheep. But as I hear it again, I realize it's the same pitch and the same length each time, like it's a recording. The more I hear it, the more unnerving it gets. I keep walking, and seconds later, I draw even with it. As I walk past, I catch a glimpse of a figure crouched in the bushes just off the trail staring at me, and a flash of teeth as, I assume, whoever or whatever was there grinned at me. I did not stop anywhere near there that night, end quote. Our witness would explain that during the incident, he was overwhelmed with fear and terror much more than should have been there had it merely been someone in the woods playing a practical joke on him or something like that. Whatever that thing was that was bleeding like a sheep was definitely not human, according to the witness. So what was it? Guys, I have no idea, but what I could tell you is that the very first thing that popped into my mind, which is normally what I go by when listening to these types of stories, was that it was some sort of elemental or forest demon. Two very different things, but not really when taking into account the lower vibrational, evil, and sometimes demonic types of elementals. But for all I know, it could have been something completely different, like an alien or an actual demon, or really anything else in the entire world for that matter. This also isn't the first time I've heard of an entity trying to imitate an animal, and it always gives me literal chills as I read through these encounters. For some reason, I just imagine the situation unfolding in my head. It scares the crap out of me because it's just so creepy and so eerie. Another one I read recently happened on a reservation, and the teenager who reported the incident was at her grandmother's house with a friend when they heard what sounded like a person imitating a dog barking on the front porch as the doorknob turned seemingly on its own. Woof, woof. Turn, turn. Ugh. A man named Eli Boschetto was camping with his wife in the Redwoods in Northern California and came back with a very strange story to tell of an encounter he had with something he believed to have been an extraterrestrial entity. Eli decided to go on a short solo hike around the area and use a headlamp instead of a regular flashlight. As he walked along, he noticed something strange off to the side of the road, and what I'm about to tell you all comes from a report on this encounter that I found on the Washington Trails Association magazine website. Quote, "At the side of the road, something stood there looking at him. Through the haze and darkness, he tried to discern what the creature was before him. It stood about 2 feet in height, completely gray, with a large round head and curious eyes. It must be a raccoon, he thought, but no. There was no mask, and no fur, and no tail. The creature cocked its head looking back. Eli took a tentative step closer to get a better look. The creature withdrew slightly, peering cautiously back. What was this thing? Time seemed to halt as the two stared at one another. Remembering his headlamp, Eli reached up to set the light brighter. The movement startled the creature, and Eli particularly noticed that the creature walked off on 2 legs, dissolving into the misty, shadowy darkness. Every hair on his arms and neck was electrified, and chills ran up and down his spine. What had he just seen? He scanned the underbrush with his headlamp, seeking to comprehend what he'd just witnessed, but the small, gray, upright creature with no fur and no tail and no mask was nowhere to be seen. Had he just seen an alien? It was a sleepless night, as every creak and crack in their pitch-black tent seemed to alert him to the possible presence of interstellar beings watching them from the woods nearby." End quote. This actually does sound more like an extraterrestrial encounter to me instead of staring entity, but then again, I'm sure there are so many entities out there, extraterrestrial and otherwise, that have been staring in the wilderness just like we saw in most of the encounters in this video and otherwise. I mean, they probably do look at you from a distance or from afar before they approach you, so I guess there's like a fine line between staring entity and entity that stares, if that makes sense. One might even be mutually exclusive to the other, but there's no way of knowing. I'm sure when you're out there in the middle of the wilderness, in the middle of nowhere, either all alone or with someone else, it doesn't really matter if you can see what's staring at you, and all that really will concern you is that something is in fact staring and or stalking you through the woods. I find it very interesting too, because so many of you know I have an obsession. Yeah, I have an obsession with the missing people in the woods, those who go missing and who are never found, or who are found deceased or deceased under mysterious circumstances. It's just too bizarre, and it's something that terrifies me when not much else really does. And I think about these things. I think about these encounters. And, you know, is it putting 2 and 2 together and making 4? I think in a lot of cases it is. It fits. It meshes. There are, of course, forces lurking that are beyond what we know and have come to be aware of, even in recent years, all over the planet. And I find that they most specifically and most prominently play a role in strange happenings in forests and in other wilderness areas in general more than anywhere else, with reservations being the second most common place where things like this are seen more than just the one-off that might happen while wandering down a big city street or waiting for a bus in the middle of a small town. I really wanted to go further into this and bring so many more encounters to you all here today, but honestly, I don't have, and I couldn't find any more. I'm sure more people now than ever are reporting things like this, but I honestly feel like people who come across entities like this don't normally make it out of the woods to talk about it, at least not alive, or they don't notice anything except the feeling of being watched by something, managing to convince themselves that whatever they saw or felt was nothing more than their imaginations running wild or a strange and one-of-a-kind trick of the light or trick of the shadows. If I do come across more stories like this, or should I say when, because it's only a matter of time, I'm sure, then I will bring them to you all immediately, as this phenomena is definitely something I'll be keeping in my eye on from now on. It's fascinating, it's terrifying, and it is so very interesting. Let me know what you all think in the comments below, please, guys. That's all I have for you today. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you want me to continue making pre-recorded videos. Spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure your notification bell is turned on. All right, YouTube, I've been seeing a lot of people like, hey, I didn't get notified for this, and I'm wondering why my views are down, and it's because most of my subscribers aren't getting notified when I'm putting out videos, even though I do put them out and I do go live basically the same exact times every single week. So I will leave the schedule for my live streams and pre-recorded videos and all that jazz in the description box, along with links for ways to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, become a patron. If you join my Patreon for $20 a month or more, every single month, you will automatically receive a personal intuitive oracle reading from me. That's 7 to 10 cards. And that's just like a gift from me to you for being a patron. Channel members are going to have additional content just for channel members, as well as pre-release of all of my Monday uploads to the best that I can manage it from here going forward. Please consider purchasing my books on Kindle or paperback through Amazon. If you want a signed copy, email me before making the purchase. So the links to the Kindle and paperback versions of Missing the Fae Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond. I just handed in Danger at Your Doorstep, Terrifying Encounters with Black-Eyed Kids. It should be out the end of December or beginning of January. Fingers crossed. All right, guys. And my Amazon wish list gift link will also be in the description box, as well as my email address, ways to contact me for any correspondence or to send in your own personal encounters with the supernatural, paranormal, bizarre, strange, terrifying, extraterrestrial, otherworldly, yada, yada, yada. Send them in. I will get to them. I promise. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you're spectacular. You're amazing. You got this. You can do anything that you put your mind to. And if you feel like nobody's got your back and you feel like somebody's trying to make you feel less than or bring you down, guess what? I believe in you. I got your back. All right. You're beautiful. You're perfect just the way you are. And you really can do anything that you set your mind to. Always go in grace. Smile at a stranger. And I'll see you guys next time.